And Russian President Vladimir Putin is steering the BRICS nations through a crisis triggered by US President Donald Trump's tariffs. In the last 24 hours, Putin held talks with Prime Minister Modi, Xi Jinping and Ramaphosa as they unite along with Brazil to counter US trade aggression. The talks come ahead of Putin's meeting with US President in Alaska next Friday. According to reports, the Kremlin said that Russian President Putin, in his phone call with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, discussed Ukraine and talks held with US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. While thanking President Putin for his detailed assessment, Prime Minister Modi reiterated India's consistent position for peaceful resolution of the war in Ukraine. The leaders also reviewed progress in the bilateral agenda and reaffirmed their commitment to further deepen the special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia. Inviting Putin to India, Prime Minister Modi said that he is looking forward to hosting him later this year. According to India's Ministry of External Affairs, Prime Minister Modi invited Putin for the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit. Earlier, Prime Minister Modi held talks with Brazil's President Lula da Silva on US trade tariffs. Both leaders agreed to enhance cooperation in trade, energy, defense and other areas as US tariffs on Brazilian goods jumped 50%. Putin also dialed his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping to update him on the latest US-Russia talks on the war in Ukraine. According to reports, Xi Jinping expressed support for a long-term solution to the conflict. Ahead of the phone call, China slammed Trump's steep tariffs on India over Russian oil purchase, calling it a clear case of tariff abuse while urging restraint. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa also held a telephonic discussion with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Ukraine war and further bilateral ties. After speaking to Putin, he spoke with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky on the peace process between Russia and Ukraine. This comes as US President has imposed 30% tariff on South African nation. Reaching out to regional allies, Russian President Putin held talks with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko on US peace proposal plans.
Извините, на одном месте ровно. И все было бы шито, крыто и гладко.
Now, US President Donald Trump's latest round of punishing tariffs kept the dice of trade rolling. Trump has now triggered a diplomatic chain reaction that is drawing China, India, Brazil and South Africa together. Now the BRICS nations are looking for ways to insulate themselves against Trump's tariff salvo. We spoke to the experts from BRICS nations. Listen to what they had to say.
It's not easy, as I just mentioned, and especially because the United States has a long history of favoring bilateral agreements. And that's exactly what President Trump is doing now, acting very strongly and promising to deal with each country individually. So it would be interesting to see if the countries in the BRICS could rise up to the challenge and act in a little more concerted effort. Doesn't mean they're going to necessarily only act together, that no longer they're going to be pursuing conversations individually with the United States, but that perhaps they could, have a little more of a unified front to deal with these challenges from the United States. And this is a little bit what President Lula in Brazil has been trying to do. His government has signaled that he wants to continue to have dialogue with the United States. There are important people from the Brazilian government in the last few weeks in Washington negotiating exemptions from some of the tariffs. But also President Lula has signaled that this will not take place. And the willingness of Brazil to negotiate with the United States is not going to be at the cost of Brazilian sovereignty, because the decision from the United States about Brazil has a very strong political motivation as well, which we can talk if you want. So Brazil has at the same time working with the United States, but also signaling that he wants also to see take the opportunity to have a concerted effort with the BRICS nations and other countries in the South.
Yes, I think that the American position is quite ambivalent here, as they're trying to press other countries which have, by the opinion of American presidents, so-called imbalanced trade with the United States, as United States actually could not earn more from trade with China or India, for instance. That is why Washington tries to press using some economic arguments. And of course, there are also some geopolitical arguments. And India and China are not in the American camp, in the Western camp, even not supporting Russia directly. India is cooperating very extensively and very significantly, which is rather unpleasant for the United States, who is trying to control all the dynamic of the foreign trade.
We have a very singularly bad incident of tariffs affecting that relationship at this point in time. But nothing is lost. We are going to still discuss in the last week of August. A US delegation is coming to discuss the trade issues further, and we will be in a position to get something out of it. And I strongly believe that once the Ukraine-Russia war is over, I'm sure US is going to look into Russia through a different lens, and that will be the time when all these, Russian tariffs will go away. And meanwhile, we'll have to keep our head cool. We'll have to negotiate, taking into account our red lines, and see that, if there is necessity to offer a market with an accelerated tariff reduction, we should be in a position to do so. But take care of the red lines very, very clearly. Those are the areas where we will be never in a position to give up our interests.
Well, push is the word, because these three countries are not so much attracted together as being pushed together, because there is continuing rivalry for influence between India and China, not to mention the border disputes. There is also not 100% alignment of interest between Russia and China. But on the other hand, all three countries are suffering from Donald Trump's no-holds-bar tariffs and other sanctions and restrictions. So these Trump is trying to invoke the rules of the jungle in place of the so-called rule-based order.
I think Mr. Trump's actions are risky in the longer term for the US's diplomatic relations with the rest of the world, and then the BRICS nations and the global South. If anything, these declarations, these announcements, these measures, if they come into play, will only serve to, as you hinted at earlier, unite them, bring them closer together in a distrust of the global North, a criticism of the West, sort of proving some of the suspicions that there had been in the past, that in the end, you make declarations about democracy and fairness, but you actually only in it for yourself.